Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Cheaper Than Therapy. Danae, I'm going to let you intro our guest just because she came to us via you, which I love when we're like, hey, have you heard of this person? That's usually how Danae and I go.
I know. I think it's such Sarah came to me as like a friend of a friend, but I
hmm
think the yoga community, I was going to say in LA, but just I guess in California in general, ends up feeling really small. And there's like all of these like little tidbits of connections, and you stumble upon some magical people that are very much like in the periphery of your world and you had no idea. And so Sarah was a treasure that I found recently and am just like blown away that I hadn't met you before, I guess a couple months ago. Um, and Sarah, welcome. Thank you for being here. And you have written a new book that we're so excited to hear about. But before we get into the book and your decision to write it, will you tell us just a little bit about you and what you do and how you came to the place of doing what you're doing now?
Well, I just want to say thank you for having me on here and for letting me invite myself over. Basically, I was like, can I come chat with both of you? Because I love talking to Danae and I love
Aw.
everything Vanessa has to post. I mean, I've been a big fan of your podcast and I knew Danae and I had crossing circles. But when we started to talk about the connections, it was like we definitely have been in rooms at the same time without knowing it. So I love that, and I
Mm.
love that sometimes it takes, maybe we would have become friends then, but I think it's like we had to go through what we had to go through and now we're forming our friendships. So
The
it's
introvert
just
probably would not have, no, because I don't talk to anybody, so I would have seen
if
you
I
and, like,
wasn't there with
waved.
her, it would not have
Vanessa would
happened.
have totally talked to you.
that's amazing. I'm like extrovert introvert. So I probably would have said hi and then gotten your number and then never called or or left the
I love
house.
it.
But anyway, I appreciate both of you. So thank you so
Aw.
much for everything you put out into the world and, the retreats that you put on. I'm so glad you've been recording them lately because the gems that come out of
Mm.
that, of your chats from, and I almost want to interview you guys and like, what's the format of that? Where do those conversations come from? Because both of you, it's just like source channeling through and it's so cool to
Mm.
hear. So I'm excited to learn today and to be here. And I forgot what you asked. I don't even think did you ask anything?
Well, you know what's so funny? Did you grow up in Toronto or you were born
LA.
in Toronto?
Yeah, I was
Okay.
born in Toronto, but I grew up in LA.
Okay, because I was like, I didn't know Sarah was Canadian as I was reading your intro. And my ex-husband is from Toronto. And okay, well, so you grew up in LA, and did you? You're a yoga teacher now, but when did you start practicing yoga?
So I started. For the Toronto thing, is I left when I was 3, but
Okay.
my dad is still living there with my stepmom. My siblings are all like 10 to 15 years older than me, so they all grew up there. By the time we moved, they'd already graduated high school or were like in
Mm.
their junior year. So we still have deep connections there. But I'm an LA girl.
Such a
I
great
started
city.
practicing in 2001. I was 19 and I was in college. And honestly, my dad sent me a VHS as a joke and for my 19th birthday
Aw.
because I was doing everything other than taking care of myself. And he was like, trying to hint, here, maybe it's time to, as you're getting older, at 19, which is so laughable now as a 41-year-old. But he's like, maybe it's time to start checking in and taking care. Because yoga was still pretty kind of counterculture too in
Mm.
2001. And little did he know the VHS he sent me, and you'll know these teachers. Both of you probably know them, Gonga White and Tracy Rich of the White
Mhm.
Lotus Foundation in Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
And my roommate, who is now also continues to be a yoga teacher, 20 odd years later, is like both of us were literally like put out our cigarettes, like moved the spinning coffee table, started to do it, and both of us were hooked
Mm.
instantaneously. And like it's kind of amazing that both of us, 20 plus years later are still. I went and did like, the movie business and like what you do living on the west side of LA, but eventually I found my way back into teaching, and I think she's been teaching pretty consistently. So it's kind of cool that, it was like it all started, it's one of those things where like someone says something to you, or it's just like the tiniest planting of a seed that grows into this whole, it's everything. I mean, it's my
Mm.
my entire life.
Mm. I love that. So, how did you kind of make your way from teaching? And then obviously you have this book that we want to get into, but I mean, was it it never is. So, this is obviously a loaded question. Was it a linear path to get there? Like, how
Yesterday.
did that come? How did the book, how was the book birthed, I suppose?
What is even, I don't even think linear, I think that is like an oxymoron. It doesn't exist. That it's
Right.
like an oasis, and that no such thing in any way. I mean, maybe just in order, but even time, I'm wondering now, is like, is that even linear? Well, I've always been a writer. I've been a writer my whole life, and I've always loved writing essays and blogs. And when I first started to teach, I started teaching in 2008, and I can't really remember when like blogs started happening, but whenever Elephant Journal and Mind Body Green first came out, which I think was like 2010.
Hmm.
I was very lucky to be one of the first writers for both of those, and I do like essays and one-offs here and there. But yoga was my life, and that's what I just poured my heart and soul into. And then when I moved up here to San Francisco, I actually started to write for Healthline. I started writing for Yoga Journal, and like I realized, I was like, oh my goodness, like this is not just for fun anymore. This is really part. I love it. It's part Dharma, but it's kind of like my yoga teaching. Like it's very confusing. It's all like deeply interconnected. I'm like, I absolutely love what I do, but I can also kind of make money from it. And I'm like, what is this?
Hmm.
And I always wanted to write a book. But I never knew what like the book was going to be. And it wasn't until I
Mhm.
became a mom and was looking for the book that I needed that I
Yes.
was like, wait, why don't I create what it is? And not to say that I'm like, the expert in all things. I actually, Danae knows, and partly why I interviewed Danae, because the bigger project of the yoga of parenting is that I went to all the experts I know. I went to all my friends that are parents. I went to therapists. I went
Mm.
to people that run mom groups and parenting groups, and I was like, let's put everything together into one place so that people who are in the yoga practice or who are interested in yoga philosophy and want to tie that into parenting, they have some place to go.
Mm.
Love that. So, will you tell us a little bit about how your life shifted when you became a mom? I love how you say it, Sarah. But like, how did life shift for you? I think that we love having conversations with women because it is such a cataclysmic shift within
Yeah.
the psyche. And if you think about Sarah pre mama and then post mama, like, how are you different that you can recognize and see clearly now?
It's funny you said cataclysmic, because in my head I was like tectonic. That was the word. Look, I'll be fully honest. I didn't really plan on becoming a mom.
Mm,
And like in retrospect, and I think I talked about this with you today. Like, I told myself it was like, oh, well, I don't need a family. Like, I'm just going to focus on my career, and I'm just going to make it all about yoga and this and that. But in retrospect, what I realized is, having lost my own mom,
Mm.
I was afraid of commitment and
Mhm.
afraid of deep loss. And so I just channeled myself into everything but. But when I met my husband, and on our second date, he was like, I was put on this earth to be a father. And I was like, I don't even like, I literally like barely held a child. I was like, maybe with the right person, I'll try it. But when we got pregnant for the first time, I mean, my entire world shifted. And even though I wasn't prepared, and I'm still not prepared, 4 years later, 5 years later, we then lost the baby. And that
Mm.
was when I had this moment of, okay, it was the scariest thing that could have happened in that moment, because that was all my fears realized. But at the same time, it reinforced what I needed to be doing in this moment and how badly I actually wanted it.
Mm.
And that sometimes the loss and the risk and the pain is worth more than hiding back, than trying to protect yourself from it. That it was like
mm,
I was ready to put myself out there again, because the joy of seeing those two lines on the stick of the life that I imagined in the short amount of time. I mean, I was 9 weeks, when we lost the baby the first time, the first baby. It was like it just it set me on this journey of like determination. I mean, it was a whole new dharma that was unfolding.
Mm.
And pregnancy with my first was fairly smooth, I have to say. I taught all the way up until like a month before I gave birth, and I was like, "See y'all in 6 weeks," like totally had no idea. Uh, and then, from the birth and up until today, again, 4 years later, everything just rocked my world. I mean, the pregnancy, I don't even want to say it was easy. It was just compared to my second pregnancy, because my second pregnancy was an HD pregnancy. But I think I was still under the illusion that I could control things until the baby came out. And then that's when everything just changed. And
Mhm.
you know, I it was like a reckoning for me. I mean, I've been in therapy since I was 8. I have, been teaching for over 15 years. I've been, into spiritual practices since I was 12. I've been doing yoga since I was 19. But like I've been on the path, right? But nothing has been a trial by fire like that first kid.
Mhm.
And we were alone, we didn't really have a village, as most families don't these days. It was just the two of us, and no grandparents. We didn't have any sort of paid support either, and then COVID hit, so we were
Yeah.
completely isolated. I was detached from like all of my regular practices. I was detached from all of my friends, so I had severe postpartum anxiety. Didn't even know what it was called. I didn't know what it was. I completely lost myself at first. And
Mhm.
then as I started to heal, finding myself again, it's like, it's so, because I think we talked about this, Janae, when you and I got to chat, is like, that it's not like a transformation into something different. It's almost like you get back to who you truly are, like
Mhm.
Mm.
who you were at your core and in your heart before, like high school and college, and trying to fit in the 20s. And like you get so far away from your truth, and then you go through motherhood and you think it's going to change you into someone even further away from that, but it's not. It brings you back to your heart and back to your core. So it
Mm.
was this long, very not linear journey. But I think ultimately now, as I sit here, mom of 2 kids, absolutely exhausted. But I feel more myself today than I have maybe since I was 5, 6.
Mm.
Honestly.
Mm.
I love
I think you're
that.
like the first woman I've heard say that
Mhm.
in the way that you did. I love it. I'm obsessed with it because it really resonates as a truth as I'm listening. And there's something else I just wanted to circle back to you that I heard you say that I thought was so interesting. So Vanessa and I have a friend who used to work in a fertility clinic, and she told us when we were in grad school that some astronomical of number of women miscarry. Like it's
Mm.
actually like almost
So it's
every
like a third, right?
woman
Mhm.
has
It's a
like their
third.
first, yeah, it's like a
Yeah.
really large number, but most women don't know they're pregnant. So
Yeah.
they don't realize but I think I had such a similar experience to what you're describing. I don't want to speak for you, Pete, but I think like we both sort of can resonate with that experience. But I think there's something spiritual in what you're describing in that space of like having the felt experience of a baby within you, getting excited and having that loss, that I
Mm.
think there's something that is cemented in myself as a mother. Like first of all, that you are a mother when you have that baby initially, even if as you have the loss, but then there's something that it just ushers in the sacred nature of motherhood for me in a way that like it's different forevermore. Like you never take this experience of getting to be a mother for granted because you know that it literally can be taken away. I think there's just something about you saying that just felt like really profound in terms of like the spiritual, like the lesson in that
Mm.
loss. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Vanessa, I felt like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, it was in my head, I was thinking I've had 2 very, I don't know if the word is different or maybe I don't think that they're opposing. I'm actually in my head, I'm trying to work out how they exist together, and I've never really thought about this, but it's like I'm
Mm,
resonating with what both of you are saying, because prior to having my daughter, I had a miscarriage and I never wanted children. And I was like
Mm.
not even on the fence about it. I mean, I was very clear that I did not want children, and got accidentally pregnant, had a miscarriage, and it was in that kind of the time after that where I was like, "Oh shit, like do I want this?" And it was something about the like I didn't, and then when it happened and I was like, "All right, well, I'm at a place where I guess I'm going to do this." And so you start to plan and you start to like visualize and see yourself in a different way than you had, right? Like
Mhm.
I had my
Mm.
life planned out in one way and now suddenly it was like, oh shit, it's going to go a different way. And in seeing myself in that place, it suddenly opened me up to like, oh shit, maybe I do want that. So it's like I'm resonating with that. And I terminated a pregnancy prior to that, many years before that, and did not have that experience, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there was definitely, it was another accidental. There was definitely grieving that went into that. And there was definitely a lot of like kind of soul searching, but my knowing that I needed to not be pregnant was very clear. And it wasn't about like, oh, I don't want to be a mother. It was just like, this is not right. Not right now, not right person, not right time, all the things, right? And so it's interesting that I've had two experiences where I was and then I wasn't, but yet they were very different experiences, right? And like,
Mm.
and that first one was still, it changed me forever, but in a very different way because I didn't come out of that thinking I wanted to be a mom, you know?
Yeah, but I think
It's
there's also a
interesting.
contextualization in, and not at all like I want to be like so clear about what I'm saying. Like one is like this was my choice versus one is like this was taken when
Yeah,
Mhm.
it was something not necessarily like in what you're describing that I desired, but like the choice was sort of taken away from me. Do you know what I
hmm,
mean? Like in
yeah,
that moment of that loss, it's like this was something I had planned for, thought was happening, and then that choice was taken away, which is like a sort of like powerlessness that I think
totally.
is, a little different visceral experience.
Because I also I had to terminate pregnancy when I was 17, and
Hmm,
it also changed me entirely.
hmm,
I mean, my whole life I like quit hard drugs and was sent
Mm,
on a completely different path, and in no
right.
way did I want that pregnancy. But what I love that you're saying, Danae, is the difference. Because I do sometimes think like, yes, it is like, and I don't want to get too yoga and woo woo on here, but like,
Do
is
it.
it
Get
like
all
yeah.
the
is
woo.
it it's like, we get kind of cracked open and then like a soul starts to download inside of you, but like at
Totally.
what point does that start to happen? And then where do they have
Hmm,
to go? And maybe they have other places to be. But I
Mhm.
think the desire for motherhood or parenthood is really coming from the choice of it. And that's what I say this in my book too. I'm like, when do you become a mom? Like when
yeah,
do you become a mom? Because so many people don't carry their children, and
Mm,
is it, are you, and there's so many people that have been trying to have kids for years and years and years. Does this
right.
mean that they're not mothers, or all the kids that
mm,
they lost? So I think the choice of it, that
Mm,
opening yourself up to it, it's like you're ready for the download, of the
yeah.
soul, that new soul or souls, if you have multiples, that really is the beginning of the process. And when that somehow gets cut off for whatever reason, right, if you have to terminate because the baby is ill, or if you lose the baby, not by choice,
Mm,
that's when it feels very stunted. And
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think there's just different parts to the process, but there's also like the science of it, with both of you will know best, which is like that your whole cellular structure changes, right? Your whole
Right.
DNA
mm,
changes just from like I think it's a few weeks of pregnancy. There's a name for it. So, but yeah, I think there's a lot of layers to it, and that transformation is not
mm.
just even on a physical level. We know, I think it really is
Hmm.
the psychological choice, the opening ourselves up to this new being.
I love that. That actually, when you said that, that landed in a way where I thought, I mean, I'm saying this with absolutely no shame in saying it. I think that happened for me around my daughter's second birthday,
Mm.
Hmm.
truly. And it's not that I didn't love her. Obviously, I
Of
did.
course.
But I think part of the reason I never wanted to have kids is because I've always been a caretaker my whole life. I was super parentified. I didn't really have a choice in the matter. It's just always been what I've done. I do it with all my friends. I do it with all my partners. Like I'm just the fucking mom, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like part of my DNA, but a part of my DNA that I always really resisted and kind of didn't like. And so
Mm,
I think when you say that, there was this choice that I made around the age of 2 where suddenly she was like this, like my buddy. You know what I mean? There was something,
Mm.
that age, because we all have a kid that's older
mhm.
than that now. Like there's something about them around that age where you're suddenly like, oh my God, I really enjoy you. Like you're really funny. You have this like personality. And suddenly we were like very connected in a way that I felt like we
Mm,
really weren't before, because it was just all about like, oh God, I gotta survive and feed her and change her and keep her alive and all these things that now, I mean, of course I'm still feeding her, but it's just different now, And so I promise everybody I'm still feeding her. But that idea of like that choice being something that kind of opens you to like that channel that feels very resonant. And I'm like, oh shit, I can like feel like I remember that moment around 2 when that happened. Mm.
I
Yeah.
love that.
I feel like there's already a few things that you've said, Sarah, that I'm like, God, that perspective is something that I have never heard someone speak
Mhm.
to, and that's really resonant and beautiful. What else are some of the things that like you felt drawn to write about in the book that are like these are like the little
The
nuggets
nuggets.
you talked
Mhm.
about, like, gathering wisdom from all these other mamas. What are some of the like things just like off the cuff that you think of when you think of those?
Well, so like part of the motivation with the book, right, is like I was looking for the book, and what was the book, right?
Mm,
I think I should go back to the books that I was reading, because there are incredible books out there. There's a lot of fantastic resources, but most of like the middle of the road parenting books, the ones that I wouldn't group under, personal development or spirituality, most of them made me feel worse, right? Like most of them were like,
Mhm.
here's the formula you must follow, here's the script. And I'm like,
mhm.
I can't remember. It's like, when you're in survival mode, like I can't
Yep.
remember a script with a demanding
Yes.
child. Like, I'm like, wait, do I get down on the level first? Do I validate next? Like what with the acronyms?
So
So there was
real.
that side of it. And then when I did, I wanted the spiritual side of it too. I wanted, to
Right.
talk about mindfulness and all that. But of course, mindfulness is all from the Buddhist perspective.
Mhm.
So I was like, well, where is the yoga of it, right? And
Mm,
just certain terms and nuggets that like we hear all the time on the mat, like even something simple, which I think is just it's cross cultural, it's just called many different things, is like prana, like energy
Mhm.
management. And it's also known as chi, or there's many different words for it, but I just wanted to hear about prana, like this. And this is kind of like what we're talking about right now, is like the opening ourselves up to the greater collective energy, like
mm,
I just wanted that kind of languaging. Or even simply the breath, like how has the breath influenced my parenting, and how can it help influence others, even just observing the breath. And the other concept of like tapas, I mean, there's many different concepts in there, but the idea was like these little nuggets that were
Mhm.
things that I practice every day on my mat. How is this coming up in my parenting, and how can I find other sources to start to tie everything together? So the biggest piece that came out of the whole book was that like yoga is not what you're doing on the mat, right? Like
mm.
don't tell my 20-year-old self that. Like, hate to break it to you, Sarah, but all those years of trying to get your leg behind your head, as fun as they were, and now we're paying for it at 41.
Mhm.
That was not it. That was not
Mhm.
it at all. The yoga
Mm,
is exactly what we're talking about right now, which
Right.
is that deeper connection. It's that soul to soul with other people and community. It's that deeper connection to the big S self of you and who you are. And that was the greatest realization of all, because here I was beating myself up that I couldn't get on the mat for more than 20 minutes, when I realized like, oh, talking to all my friends and talking to all of these amazing experts, we're doing yoga every second of every day, that we are caretaking for
mm,
another being. And
Yes.
this happens to be a parenting book, but it's like you were saying, Vanessa, being a caretaker to your friends, to your to elder parents or family members. All of that is yoga, and that's the best lesson of it all, because then I'm like, okay, even right now, breathing in this toddler meltdown, as I've got a very strong Aries personality side, like I'm like, okay, this is my yoga in this moment, and it absolutely is, and it's actually made it even richer and more beautiful than any leg behind the head I ever did.
Mm.
mm.
Yeah.
I love so much that you're talking about like the management of chi, because I think
Mm.
something Vanessa and I talk a lot about is that like we weren't really aware until we became parents the extent to which like there's like this management of the energy that's happening. And it's not just the energy between you and your child, it's the energy between you and your partner, and how they are both sort of like pulling on your energy resources, and like that you can just feel so like I am losing my center in the
Mhm.
extent to which the life force is sort of being drawn out of me at
The
some
way we talk about
moment.
it sounds so abysmal. The way your life force is just being
Well,
sucked out of you.
It's
But
it
it's
is
real.
literally happening. That
No,
is
it is.
exactly what's happening.
I just listen, we have to laugh or we'll cry, okay? I think it's hilarious.
Vanessa sent me the funniest meme this morning that was like this mom going back and forth, and it's hell and I never sleep, but I love it. And it's just like the back and forth of like what it is to be a mom, and that it's like so the richest, most, I love the way you spoke to it, Sarah, like the return to self and the most challenging experience of like stepping up into what I'm capable of being that I will ever experience in this lifetime. Like I think I'm constantly like my 6-year-old, I'm like every like it's just a new thing. And then it's like this is happening with swimming and this is happening with potty training. Like it's always a something that is
Mhm.
challenging you to like be confronted with like, okay, who do you want to be, Danae? How do you want to show up for this? I mean, and that's
Do you
the
guys ever
yoga.
wonder though that, and because I do remember us talking about this, Danae, was that if we were in a village, if we were really raising our kids
Mhm.
in a collective and in a community where we were not our partner's only source, which many of us are, because like
That's right.
thankfully I have a whole team. I've got a psychiatrist and a therapist, but like many of us are the only source for
Mhm.
for partners. If we had the uncles and the aunties and the grandparents and the neighbors, and we do have our neighbors obviously, but if it was truly in the village form,
Yes.
do you think we would be as depleted as we are in this modern era? Because I don't, it's
No.
like, or like if postpartum was as honored and sacred as it should be, and we had all the aunties coming in and taking care of us,
Mhm.
like it's like we come in at a deficit, then we're completely isolated and stripped away. And
Mhm.
like in our situation, we live quite far from everybody. I mean, my brother's in the city, but he's got another toddler, so like how are you taking care of each other's kids?
Right.
But it's like, yeah, you come in like you're already at a deficit, and then you're just playing catch up, and then it just gets more and more intense, the scheduling, and you're going to enter like the sport zone soon, which a lot of my girlfriends are in, which is like, I can't
Yes.
even. I'm like, how are they in 6 different sports in one week? I don't understand. How
No.
are they in
No.
basketball and swimming? And it's like, I'm not doing
That's a
that.
resounding no.
Oh no. Yeah. And then talk to me in 3 years, and that's exactly what I'll be doing. But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder, because we do talk about it, as like this beauty of motherhood. And, it is the most, their parenthood in general. I don't want, I know many people don't identify as moms, but still gave birth. But like, yeah, I just wonder, would it be as depleting? Would it be, obviously you're going to go through maiden to mother to crone and all those phases, but I just always wonder if we were really in the settings that humans and social creatures were meant to be in, what would the energy management be like? I don't know.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think from the time we had children, both Vanessa and I talked to each other about like, we were not meant to do this by ourselves. And I think there's a visceral sense of that we feel when we have babies, that like I am the most introverted person on the planet, as we talked about. And I have never felt a sense of like, I need more mamas. Like, I need someone to tell me like something here. Like, I need some sort of salva for like how isolated I feel in this. But one other thing you said that I think is really important to name is like, I think the quote support that we get a lot of time from our elders is like, you need to be doing more. You
Mm.
need to
Mhm.
be more perfect at this. You need to put them in more sports. You need to like,
Mhm.
and to me, like the support we can give one another beyond the like physical support and beyond the like, I don't know, helping one another with the actual raising of our kids. And yes, absolutely, I am so on board with that. But I think what we can support one another in more is some of what you're talking about, which is you're absolutely doing enough.
Mhm.
And whatever scripts people are telling you, and however like they're telling you to do this perfectly, like we need to take some of the pressure off. Because what I experience with moms and parents, to your point, more than anything else, is the level of pressure to be doing this correctly is like
Like
it's like
debilitating,
immobilizing.
basically.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
debilitating. Thank you. Like, it's just like I don't even know what to do,
Yep.
but I'm hating my life because
Yeah.
it's so hard to feel like I'm getting this right. And I'm like, hey, you're doing enough. Like,
Yeah.
do less.
Yeah.
Take it down times 10. That's what you can do. But I really don't think that's a permission or even a validation that our society offers parents very often. It's like, nope, they need to be in every sport. They need to do
Mhm.
all the things. They need to be, or somehow you failed as a parent. And I don't know. I just reject it. I can't.
I mean, I have to say, like, we're doing. My son's only 4. I'm like, we're doing a good job. But that's like even when it comes to the birthday parties. Like when I check in with my friends that are back home, and like the birthday
Mhm.
parties that went down for the 1, 2, 3 year olds, and like I'm like, no, we're going to a park. I'm not
Yeah.
even going to rent the table through the city. Sorry, city of San Rafael. And like everyone's going to come, and like it's fine. Maybe I'll throw some like pirates booty in a, like but I just there's certain things I don't want to participate in. I
Yeah.
think what's going to be harder is when the kids are older and they want to be in all of those things, how you're kind of managing
Mm.
that part of it. But I do think that's all energy management too. And that, like,
Mhm.
thank goodness for the yoga mat, because what started as, okay, maybe this is not the time to take a chaturanga push up and do a vinyasa, has now translated into, oh, I don't want to do that play date on Saturday because, we are doing one on Sunday, and like learning how to manage energy in a different way, which is
Mm.
so much what we're talking about too. And first you have to be aware of the energy, right? And I think a lot of people just aren't. I think we're
Mm-mm.
so many of us are in survival mode and running on empty, that we think we're getting it all done, but we're just on adrenaline,
Well, I
and
think
exhausted.
also so many people are so used to running away from stillness,
Hmm.
right? So I think one of the benefits, I mean, all three of us in here obviously having very strong, the actual movement component of yoga, but like a very strong yoga practice going into parenthood. I think what that did for me that I wasn't really even able to acknowledge until maybe a couple years in was because I had done the work around stillness before giving birth. And I had really reclaimed it. Not perfect at it. I'm from the Northeast. I still have that like New Yorker kind of energy in me. I can definitely deplete myself if I'm not careful and paying attention, but I have a relationship with stillness, at least enough where I can tap into that. And I think I see a lot of people, especially mothers, who have no relationship to stillness. And then they get into motherhood and it just
Mm.
turns it up. And you want to ask people like, what are you running from, right? Like,
Mm.
why do you keep yourself so busy? Because you don't actually seem happy. You don't
Mm.
actually seem fulfilled. You don't actually seem like you're enjoying all of the busyness. You seem like you're doing it in order to not be still, is what it seems like. Maybe that's my therapist hat coming into play, but I just see it so often. And I think that, whether it's yoga or meditation or whatever form that takes for you, I think cultivating a practice of stillness, if you have the ability to do it before becoming a parent, great. But if not, realizing how important it is just in general for life, I think it's just really beneficial for all of us, especially in this culture, this like hustle culture that we're in.
And I think stillness looks different for everybody, right? Because, obviously, and you guys, you know best, you're the therapist, but like if someone has a trauma background, like sitting in silence or laying
Right.
quietly is not going to be restful. But maybe being outside and walking
Right.
in like a city center could be, or, something. It's so but it's how are you finding, like, it's almost like maybe stillness isn't the word, because some people need movement to get there, but I
Mhm.
understand what you're getting at. Like, we can brainstorm it, we should workshop the word, but it's like it's almost like
Mhm.
it's like grounding. What are you doing to ground yourself?
Mm.
And whether that is sitting quietly for 15 minutes in the morning, or moving your body in yoga asana, or driving around with the music on full blast, but what are those things that you're doing where it is off the to-do list, right? It's not because you're knocking things off of your list. I mean, this is totally unrelated, and I'm just going to share it because you're a therapist and I thought you'd find this interesting. It's not unrelated, but it's like not necessarily about the yoga of parenting. It's just my own personal anxiety. But usually when I'm in high anxiety, I have generalized anxiety disorder. I'm on medication. It's a lifelong journey. But one of the things that I do is I overschedule. That's how I avoid it. So when I'm in
Mhm.
that feeling of like wanting to rip my skin off because I'm so uncomfortable, I go and I do and do and do.
Mm.
And the other day I was like, what if I just stopped? What if I
Mm.
just actually stopped, which is the scariest thing I've ever done. And I know it sounds like, anybody that's listening is probably like, well, yeah, of course. I mean, your body's telling you to stop, but it was like, I mean, I think it's exactly what we're talking about. It was just like stopping to just be in the discomfort as opposed to trying to cover it all up.
Mm.
Right. And it ended up being like I could digest it better, right? I could tolerate it more just by accepting I'm going to be uncomfortable for this minute
Mm.
because I'm going to sit in my discomfort for the minute. And it was just like, as opposed to always trying to run ahead of it. I mean, it felt very like mind blowing and interesting. And, I mean, it's like I do it all the time when my kids are having a tantrum. I'm like, okay, just sit in it, right? I do it when I'm in a warrior two and my front leg is burning, but I
Mm.
hardly do it for my anxiety. For whatever reason, when I'm anxious, I'm like, push it away, make it change, do something different. But I was like, well, let's try this with anxiety. And it was like, felt very revolutionary. Just like, okay, what are you feeling? Where is it in your body? What's your breathing doing? It was really interesting approach.
Mm. I love that, Sarah. I think it's for me sort of circles back to what you were saying before about the ways that motherhood sort of circles us back to a sense of home, a sense of self within ourselves, almost because I feel like we don't have another option. Like we have to keep going. But like a lot of times, I think what you're saying is really important because after I had a baby, like all of my tools in my toolkit just like wouldn't work for me.
Yeah,
Like I
same.
couldn't get on the mat and do the
Mhm.
things that I could do. I couldn't find peace in my body. And it was
Mhm.
deeply destabilizing. And I was like, okay, what can I do? Start where I am, use what I have, do what I can. I'm going to go on a hike. I'm going to
Mm.
strap my kid to me and I'm going to go and be in nature. And I felt better. But that wasn't what I did before I had a baby. It was just, I had to acquire some different tools, but some of those tools brought me back to nature and back to like source in a way that I didn't realize I was so hungry for until I had no choice.
Mm. I love that. What do you feel like, Sarah? I mean, for listeners who, don't have or haven't had a yoga practice, I mean, if they were to pick up your book, what do you feel like are some ways that, that kind of population can still benefit from what's in there and kind of the wisdom you've kind of culled together?
So it's funny because I did a book event and somebody's like, "What if you hate yoga?" And I was like, I'm
Why are
like,
you here?
yeah, well, I like, well, because she was like supporting the woman that I was co-presenting with, and she's like, "I like you, but I don't really like the yoga." I mean, I think we have to go back to again redefining what yoga is,
Yeah.
and people may not have ever come to a mat and done a downward dog or a tree pose, what you would imagine what the movement is. But
Mhm.
I guarantee you, if you're a human living in this world and interacting with other humans, then you're doing yoga every day. So redefining what that is. There are some poses in it, but it's not like sequences, right? Every chapter, it's really multi-sensorial. And I didn't even realize, a friend of mine was like, so did you know that you designed your book about the koshas? Because like in the yoga tradition, we believe that there's multiple layers to our being, from the physical sense to the energetic sense to the mind layer, right, to the wisdom layer to then your soul layer. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even know that I organized my book at all. I was like, here's just all my thoughts, and my editor had to like put it together. But I was like, oh my goodness, like that's kind of what we do. So
Mm.
every chapter has one pose, which is very accessible, and that's just how are you going to feel it in your physical body. And then we talk about how are you feeling it in the energy body. We talk about breath practices, just really simple, like pause, take a breath. It's,
Mhm.
it's literally that. They're called breath breaks. And then the mental part of it too, which is like, how is modern psychology and brain research backing
Mhm.
up all this stuff that we've been claiming for millennia?
Mhm.
And the wisdom body of like, what's the deeper intuition for you? What's the deeper knowing? And every chapter ends with it's like called off the mat and into family exercise. And it's just like, whether it's a journal prompt or a visualization meditation, but it's just so that we can tap into our own innate wisdom.
Mhm.
Because as I say in the book, and it's like, people are then like, why buy the book? It's like, you don't even need the book, right? Like, you have all the answers within. But I think we just get blocked off to it. It's like, that it goes back to that journey, right, where
Mhm.
we're so connected to our needs. And especially, I watch my baby, right? Like, my baby knows exactly what he needs at all times. It may seem erratic, and it may go from like, I'm hot, I'm cold, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. But there's a tuning in there that the kids have that we then start to lose. And I'm watching it with my 4-year-old, who just had a really bad fall.
Wow.
and ended up in the hospital. It was like a whole thing. And I'm watching fear start to build, and I'm watching the
Mhm.
stories start to build, and I'm
Yeah.
watching he's not tapped into his intuition. Like he climbed way up. We were at a playground and he climbed all the way up, and then he got up and he panicked. And it was like his body knew
Mhm.
what to do, but then the mind started to, and then, anyway. So, what can we do? And then we start having the social conditioning too, right? Of friends and those
Mm.
judgments. So what happens when we become parents, and how can we get back to those places of deeper knowing? Well, thankfully yoga has so many tools, whether it is through the body or through a sitting practice or through very simply just asking yourself a question. One of the chapters I suggest just observing your kids for like
Mm.
20 minutes, and just like watch and just like what comes up for you. So I think the long answer to that is that, yoga is way more than the poses, and there's so many different avenues to find this connection and this grounding that really is the yoga practice.
Beautiful.
I love
Well, I love it. I'm sold. So
it.
we have our lightning round of questions that we want to ask you. Wait, that went fast. The first question, Sarah, is who have been your greatest teachers, mentors, people that have influenced your path up to this point?
Mm. Well, my parents, of course, I mean, like, and it's funny because I feel like, you talk about the book, you're like, well, then my dad did this. But the reality is, for all the humanness that was my parents, they were also, there was a lot of love and a lot of
Mhm.
healing and a lot of coming together. And, that is just the greatest teachers is, showing up as adults and doing the work in the reparations of the things that happened when we were younger. So 100% my parents and their ability to apologize and stand in their
Mm.
truth and stand in their
Mm.
power now. Um, all my yoga teachers, I mean, I don't have the time to name them all, but I will say like Mati Israti and Annie Carpenter, my two top teachers, and Mati Danae knows passed away a couple years ago. I was actually
Yes.
pregnant with Jonah, with my first, because she was like my yoga mama, and Annie continues to be too. And then my kids, I like, and I'm not just saying that. Everybody's like, they're like living Buddhas, right? I think John
Mhm.
Kabat-Zinn says that, but they really are my teachers.
Yes.
Like I learned so much through them.
Mm.
It's pretty remarkable, and whether it's just like seeing my own tendencies and I was like, oh, I don't really like that. Like, oh, I really like that. But it's just learning in that way. It's such a wonderful,
Mm.
wonderful, every day is an adventure. Every day is a
Mhm.
lesson.
Amen.
Love it.
So this concept of flow, right? This thing that you can do and the thinking brain shuts off. You can blink your eyes and
Mm,
an entire day goes by. What is that for you? What do you find flow in?
writing.
Mm.
1000%. It's, and I guess it was yoga at some point, maybe when I was in Ashtanga, like, my
Mhm.
asana practice, but
Mm.
it's always been writing. My whole life it's been writing, and like we're like hours and hours will go by. I have no idea.
Mm.
But yeah, it's always my writing.
I love that.
Beautiful.
Like this idea that it can change and evolve as you evolve and then maybe come back to something that has always
Mm,
been there as a through line. It's beautiful.
yeah.
Mm. And what breaks your heart, Sarah?
I was like, the world. Sorry.
Mhm.
It's like uncomfortable laughter. Insert uncomfortable laughter.
I mean, we get it.
Um, yeah. Am I allowed to cuss? Sorry. It breaks my heart that like I went and did a staycation with my son in San Francisco and went to go see the sea lions, all the seals and the sea lions. And there was two.
Mm.
Like it breaks my heart that we went scuba diving in the Great Barrier Reef and I couldn't see anything. Everything's the corals all bleached.
Mhm.
And that, my son will see an elephant or something on the TV and I'm like, I can't promise him that'll still be around when he gets older. It really does break my heart. It just does. It's just like, what it just does. I know. And I'm not like a huge, I mean, I'd like to consider myself an activist. I think I'm a lot more outspoken and passionate when it comes to like parental rights and, that kind of stuff, which is a little bit more the nitty gritty. But when I pause and when I pull back and when I look at the world that I'm handing my sons, it breaks my heart what we're
Mm.
handing over to them. And I just have to trust that this is that this is our purpose, and we just have to keep moving forward, and I can only educate them the best ways that I can. And I don't know what the future is going to bring. We never know what the future is going to bring, but yeah, it's pretty.
Mhm.
That's that now. That's all I know.
Mm.
I mean, you asked the questions. I don't have to. I'm like trying to talk toxic positivity it over, but no, I'm just gonna. We'll just sit with it. That's all. I'll just
Yep.
breathe.
Yep. That's it. The world we're handing over. It's a tough one, tough pill to swallow. It's one of the reasons,
Mm,
actually, one of the many reasons I didn't think I wanted children.
yeah.
Um, and then the last question is the clincher. What is your favorite food?
I mean, pizza. Like who isn't it?
I
Yeah,
Isn't
co-sign that.
everybody's pizza? I
I
feel like
mean,
it's pizza. Yeah, I mean, pizza's like the perfect food. It's pizza. I mean,
pizza.
pizza. Yeah. And
Absolutely.
pepperoni pizza. I went through my vegan stage, and I was a vegetarian for years on and off. And bacon was like bacon was always an exception. My dad would always say bacon is its own food group because we're Jewish, and so like we never kept kosher. And he's like, bacon is its own food group. It's totally kosher. And for pepperoni pizza was one of the first meats that I ate again when I started
Mm.
to reintroduce meat when I met my husband. It was pepperoni pizza. And now I'm eating everything again. But yeah, I'm like, oh my God, how did I ever live without this? Like we have it at least once a week. And especially having two kids and a husband, and having to feed a full family
Oh, we're a
in the
pizza
Bay
family.
Area.
No
Yeah,
question.
it's like
Give
we
me
had
all
a
the carbs.
$35 pizza, a $35. I mean, I was like, wait, this is supposed to be the inexpensive path.
Oh
But
my
you know what?
God.
No such thing
Yeah,
anymore. Doesn't
nope,
exist.
nope. But
Aw.
still worth it, still delicious. And yeah, definitely my fave.
Well, Sarah, you are such a treasure. I have to thank our mutual friend, Patty,
Thank you.
again for making the introduction. I'm so grateful to know you. And I just have to interject. I do think that you are doing a tremendous amount of activism in
Mm,
writing a book like this.
thank
I
you.
think offering parents tools to really be able to stay with themselves in a time where that is what I mean, you're talking to therapists, but I think we believe this world needs more than anything else, right? Because
Mhm.
when we have the ability to stay in our bodies and attempt to self regulate, we don't sort of react and lash out and do things that are going to be harmful for our children and the next generation. So, this activism to me matters more than anything else. So thank you
Thank
for your
you.
activism and the way you're showing up in the world. And thank you for being here, sister.
Thank you. I'll take that in. And Patty Pena is who we're talking about, who's a phenomenal photographer in LA. Am I allowed to give her a shout out? Patricia Pena.
Please, I'm
Oh, is that
Amazing.
who
all the love
introduced
to
you guys?
Patty.
I know Patty.
Yes. Yeah.
Patty's
Yeah.
done a lot of our
And Vanessa, I'm
photos.
so glad to finally meet you
Yeah,
in
same.
person, IRL. And, I mean, it's funny, you have these like parasocial relationships with people. I'm like, oh, I know you. We're like
I know.
besties. We've never actually sat down. But yeah, and
Thank
thank
you
you
so much.
both for everything that you're doing in the world. And this podcast, what a resource for
Thank
people.
you. And we'll link
Both of you,
everything in
thank you.
the show notes and everything, but where can people find you if they want to connect with you online?
I'm probably most active on Instagram, Sarah Ezrin Yoga, or just my website, sarahezrinyoga.com. And all the info's on the book there and book tour dates. We're still out and about. We're going to pick it. I don't know when this will air, but we'll be picking it back up in fall of 2023. And I plan to keep going. It's so, I am also an introvert, or at least I think I am, but for some reason, motherhood is turning me into like wanting to be out more in the world. And I don't know if I don't know. Like if I could be home alone and in my bed and not talk to anybody, then I'd be a very happy person. But because I've got those two kids at home who are like climbing the walls at all times, I'm like, let's go be with other people. So we're doing that in the form of different events all over, and it's so much fun. So
Love
yeah,
it.
that's
We'll
what's
have to
going on. Yeah,
try to come out to one
Beautiful.
of them if you have a local one.
I would love that.
Yeah, let us know.
Yeah.
Yeah.